Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm your host, meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Saturday, September 11th, 2021. And as always, if you'd like additional weather information, you can find it at weather.gov/Alaska. And if you have any questions or interesting observations or photos you wish to pass along, you can reach me at peter.chan@noaa.gov. Well, on the weather headlines on this Saturday evening, we are going to be watching a stronger area of low pressure moving inland into southwest Alaska as we head through Sunday afternoon and evening. And this is all part of a transition to the fall season. We're starting to see a more progressive pattern with a little stronger areas of low pressure now that we are seeing the cooler air beginning to return. It's going to produce some stronger gusty winds in south central and southwest parts of the state. Some rainfall amounts locally over an inch, maybe even isolated rumble of thunder, especially along portions of the Alaska Peninsula on out crossing the Gulf. Tonight there will be some clear skies in the interior, especially north of the Alaska Range, so you may have a chance to see the aurora. The moon phase is still a day and a half away from first quarter moon, so it'd be a good night. The sky should generally be quite dark, especially around and after local midnight. And it looks like the overall pattern across the state will be cooler and a bit on the drier side, especially southwest and south central areas of the state, September 17th through the 21st. So maybe not quite as wet as it has been at least much of this month. Now, there is a wind advisory in effect for Sunday. That's Sunday evening through the day, Monday through Monday late afternoon, early evening, for portions of the central eastern Alaska Range, including areas around Haisley, as well as Donnelly, where south winds ahead of the system could gust as high as 55 to 65 miles an hour. Also, there'll be some stronger wind gusts in the Anchorage area around Alyeska, the eastern hills on up toward Wasilla. There could be some wind gusts of 50 to 60 miles an hour Monday afternoon, early evening, as an occluded front lifts northeastward across the region in association with that deepening area of low pressure. Now, precipitation forecast for the day on Sunday, we can see areas along the lower Alaska Range extending out into the Alaska Peninsula could locally exceed an inch to an inch and a half of rainfall, especially there just east of King Salmon and east of Cold Bay. And those rains will continue spreading eastward with the occluded front Sunday night into Monday, where the Panhandle will also be picking up rain. So areas, especially from around and east of Prince William Sound through Yakutat to Juneau, could locally pick up over an inch of rainfall then on Monday. So here is the satellite imagery. We can see one little remnant system, little area of low pressure that's weakening now just off of the northern half of the Panhandle. There's another low pressure system located kind of out toward the southwest Gulf, North Pacific interface. But the main piece of energy we're watching now is currently working its way through the eastern Aleutians, and that's what's going to help spin up a stronger area of low pressure that's going to cross through the southeast Bering just north of the eastern Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula as we head through the day on Sunday. Right now, just a broad area of low pressure across much of the Bering there from up there near St. Lawrence Island southward all the way to just north of the central and eastern Aleutians. And then weak high pressure along the Alcan border. That's going to provide some of those clearer skies, at least for tonight there, the interior, east central interior. But by the overnight, early Sunday morning, we'll see that low getting a little better organized as it moves just north of the tip of the Alaska Peninsula. There could even be some isolated rumbles of thunder there along the eastern Aleutians, and as it passes there south of the Alaska Peninsula, as an occluded front begins to take shape. And that'll be the main weather feature during the day on Sunday. We're going to see the low pressure bottom out to almost 980 millibars. So that's been one of the stronger ones we've seen so far this very late summer, early fall season. And some of the rains will be moderate to briefly heavy at times as that occluded front lifts to the northeast, crossing through the western and then the north central Gulf region. Again, winds will be gusty along and ahead of that occluded front. Look for southeast winds veering southwest in and around Cook Inlet, including the Anchorage area where there could be some stronger wind gusts. And then by the time that system moves up into the Alaska range, there'll be some winds as high as 55 to 65 miles an hour from the central and eastern portions of the Alaska range for Sunday evening into Monday afternoon. And that occluded front will just tend to weaken into a trough and move onshore into the Panhandle on Monday afternoon, bringing some rainfall there as the main low gradually begins to weaken then over the Seward Peninsula and the southwest interior. Temperatures are going to be overnight upper 40s to near 50 degrees across the Panhandle. Generally in the lower to mid 40s, the south central areas, though the interiors could see lows dip down into the mid upper 30s in some of the cooler spots that keep the clearing. And then high temperatures across much of the region, generally mid upper 50s on Sunday, with increasing cloud cover and breezier conditions developing over south central areas with the approaching of that occluded front. Lows Monday morning, upper 40s near 50 across the Panhandle, generally in the 40s, low mid 40s across much of the south central areas, with highs area-wide generally in the 50s Monday afternoon. North slope for Sunday morning, lows mid 30s, otherwise 40 plus along the Yukon River. High temperatures still could squeak out a few lower 60-degree readings around Fairbanks as well as along the Alcan border at areas like Northway on up toward Eagle, and generally highs only in the mid-upper 40s along the Arctic coast and coastal areas of the Seward Peninsula. And look for low temperatures Monday morning, mid-30s along the Arctic coast, generally 40s elsewhere. And high temperatures will only be in the lower 40s along the Arctic coast Monday, mid-upper 40s the coastal areas of the Seward Peninsula, and then 50s, generally 50s there throughout the Yukon Valley. And in the southwest, we're looking for lows Sunday morning, mid-40s across the interior, upper 40s near 50 in the Alaska Peninsula, and upper 40s through the Aleutians. High temperatures Sunday afternoon with cloud cover rain overspreading the area will generally only be in the lower 50s, mid-50s at best across the entire region. Low temperatures Monday morning, lower 40s in through the interior, mid to upper 40s across the Alaska Peninsula into the Aleutians. And then high temperatures Monday afternoon with still some lingering cloud cover and the cooler flow on the backside of that low will only be in the lower 50s or so for highs across much of the region. And a quick check of the temperature outlook for September 17th through the 21st shows that the greatest likelihood for below normal temperatures will be over southwest portions of the state. And then as we take a look at precipitation, the trend is toward drier conditions for a change there in through the southwest, especially the Alaska Peninsula on up through Kodiak Island, the Kenai, and Cook Inlet. So that would be a welcome change, even though it may be a bit cooler, to have some drier weather to wrap up some projects before the really colder fall weather begins to settle in. So there you have it. We do have a low pressure, though, that'll be impacting the region, especially southwest parts of the state into south central areas Sunday into early.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
In your aviation weather, if you are planning a flight Sunday into Monday, the main weather player will be a deepening area of low pressure lifting out of the lower Bering Sea north of the Alaska Peninsula, lifting northeastward into the southwest interior, Bristol Bay area. This low will deepen to just above 980 millibars as we head through Sunday evening and Sunday night. This feature will have an occluded front working its way eastward, and there is even the potential for some embedded thunderstorms as this feature is rather dynamic. It'll also have a stronger wind field, so there will be an increased threat of some turbulence, some moderate to even perhaps isolated severe turbulence. Let's look at what we have here for Sunday afternoon. The low pressure will be lifting up there toward Bristol Bay and deepening. Thunderstorms will be embedded along and behind the occluded front as there's some pretty good dynamics aloft and some elevated instability. Thunderstorm threat from the tip of the Kenai down across Kodiak Island out across the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, with IFR conditions lifting through the northern Gulf, as well as back there in portions of the southwest on up into the eastern Bering. And then Monday morning, still a potential for some embedded thunder post-frontal behind the occluded front near the eastern end of the low center. out there across the northern Gulf with areas of IFR, especially in through the southwest. And then for Monday afternoon, still potential for some isolated thunder there along the north central Gulf with IFR conditions spreading into the Panhandle and persisting across the southwest, as well as occurring farther north along the Arctic coast. Past conditions on Sunday, we're looking for Anatuvik, as well as Adigan Pass there in the north to be MVFR, becoming VFR, especially by later morning and afternoon. And further south and west, Lake Clark and Merrill should generally see MVFR conditions. That'll also be the case for Rainy Pass as we round up along the north and central Alaska range, MVFR to VFR at Windy Pass, as well as further east at Isabel, look for MVFR conditions there in the early morning, becoming VFR. And Mentasta should generally hold on to VFR conditions during the day on Sunday. Further south and west, Tanita will start out VFR, but MVFR conditions as some lower ceilings begin to approach from the southwest as that occluded front begins to work its way northeastward. And Portage Pass should generally have MVFR conditions throughout the day on Sunday, though especially south of the east entrance, we'll see IFR conditions creeping northeastward from out of the northern Gulf. And Chilkoot and White in the northern Panhandle will see MVFR conditions throughout the day on Sunday. Check of freezing levels. They are generally around or just under between 6,000 and just under 8,000 feet across much of the east and the Panhandle. Further west, freezing levels drop to near 4,000 feet northwest coast to St. Lawrence Island and below 2,000 feet in eastern Russia. Greatest potential for icing with this low pressure system, attendant fronts and areas of precipitation will be from the Bering Strait and Seward Peninsula down through Nunavik Island, 7,000 to 15,000 feet, and then along the occluded front lifting northeastward there, it'll be from around Kodiak Island across much of the Alaska Peninsula between 8,000 and a flight level of 18,000 feet. A look at the wind fields aloft, upper level 30,000 foot jet stream level winds, jet core max from the southwest in a excess of 120 to near 130 knots there east of the Alaska Peninsula over the North Pacific, working its way into the western Gulf. And as we drop down to 9,000 foot mid-level winds, pretty strong wind field, upwards to 45 to 75 knots coming onshore south central areas around the Kenai, northern Cook Inlet, and then generally 50 knot winds there across portions of the Alaska Peninsula from the northwest, and then dropping down to the 3,000 foot level. We see the low pressure circulation located there near Bristol Bay with winds around it upwards of 50 to 60 knots ahead of the occluded front from the southeast, shifting to the southwest, 45 to 60 knots south of the Kenai, and including Kodiak Island in areas southward. This is going to translate to widespread areas of considerable moderate turbulence from just north of the Alaska Range across the Alaska Peninsula, the Kenai, Kodiak Island, extending back out through the Aleutian Chain, surface to 4,000 feet, trailing off to surface to 3,000 feet as you get back toward the central Aleutians. And also a pocket of wind of turbulence there, northern portion of the Seward Peninsula, surface to 4,000 feet. So that does it for your flight weather. If you are heading out, please check the latest conditions and have a safe flight.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining me once again is Eric Stevens from the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, or GINA, based at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Eric, welcome back to the show.
Well, Dave, it's great to be back. Thanks for inviting us again.
Sure thing. And today we want to talk about identifying burn scars. That would be the burned up area after a wildfire when the flames and the smoke are gone. We can see it if you drive by it on the roadway, of course, but from satellite, we can also identify those places on the land, right?
You know it. You know that expression, ouch, that's going to leave a mark?
Yeah.
After you bang your knee getting out of the car. You go,
Oh, yeah.
Well, the ouch, it's going to leave a mark, that also applies to the landscape. Whenever a wildfire ravages through, it's going to leave a mark on the landscape. After a wildfire burns out, this is called a burn scar.
Okay.
And you can ask yourself, well, that's interesting. We can see a burn scar from space. Then the question is, well, why does that matter?
Okay.
Who cares?
Yeah, fire's over.
Right, the fire is over. We don't need to worry about this anymore. It turns out you kind of do, because burn scars are important. There's this old rule of thumb in the weather business that flood follows fire.
Okay.
The action of the fire in killing off the vegetation, in baking, kiln drying the landscape a little bit, can hinder the land's ability to absorb rainfall. So if you have a fire, especially if it's in complex mountainous terrain.
Right.
This is classic in California. It can happen somewhat in Alaska too. You get a wildfire in steep, hilly, or mountainous terrain, rips off all the vegetation off the landscape. Then 6 months later, there's a big rainstorm, and you get a flash flood in that area. So
Right.
flood can follow fire. That's why you got to know where the burn
That's
scars
important.
are. Secondly, a fire needs fuel to maintain itself. So if there's an old burn scar left over from a year or two ago, and then another summer later here in Alaska in the interior, it's a big wildfire season. If there's a fire advancing toward an old burn scar, well, guess what? That old burn scar can be tougher terrain for that new fire to get through because there's not as much fuel in that burn scar. So they almost act like a natural fire break. These are a couple of reasons why you need to know where those burn scars are. Alaska Fire Service has limited resources. They want to put their people and their equipment where it does the most good. They need to know, well, this is an area where there's no burn scar. We better put people here because that fire could really run.
So
That's why we do
really
it.
important for weather forecasters and fire weather forecasters for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But then how do weather satellites actually detect those burn scars?
Ah, good question.
Thanks.
Well, let's turn the Wayback Machine to the summer of 2015. That was a
Okay.
very active year. Got a picture here taken up in the White Mountains. This is one of the fires in progress that summer, and if you look real close, you can almost see Frodo throwing the ring into
Right,
the
no kidding.
volcano there. So that's quite the vision. Well, let's look at a visible image. Here we are in Alaska's interior. This is before the fires got out of the cage in early summer of 2015. Let's zoom into the western interior here. Again, this is a weather satellite image of visible light, what the human eye can see. We're into the middle reach of the Yukon Valley there in the western interior, Galena area. And this is just a beautiful visible day. Nothing much going on. It's in early June before the fires really got active. But then in 2015, the fires got loose, especially in that western interior.
Right.
Here's another image. The same satellite pass as that visible image, but now we're not quite looking at visible light.
Very different.
There's a slight change here. This image incorporates something called the veggie band.
Okay.
0.86 micron wavelength. The micron's very tiny, but that wavelength responds to vegetation, the chlorophyll. So trees and grasses reflect that part of the electromagnetic spectrum back to the satellite. And so the satellite sees that. When signal comes at that wavelength to the satellite, we know, there's some vegetation growing there. This is great. You can identify coastlines so easily because you go from vegetation to water. Turns out if you have a burn scar, guess what? You burned away the vegetation, so that's going to show up. We're going to do a before, during, and after kind of look here. And so we're looking at before. So in this image, we got a lot of green out there. That's wonderful.
Right.
Another fun thing about this kind of imagery is you can see down in the Alaska Range in the southeast corner of the image, it's blue.
Yeah.
That's glaciers and snow in the
of course.
mountains.
Okay.
So this is not really what the human eye can see. This is these wavelengths are beyond human vision, but we've made them look certain colors. So the vegetation looks green. Now let's look at that same kind of satellite recipe, but during the fires. This is in July. The fires are loose. You can see the smoke in the middle of the image, the smearing look of the smoke, and then we can see some clouds that are white. Icy clouds are blue. So this is in July of 2015. The fires are doing their thing. We're burning up millions of acres. Now let's go to September. The fires are out. The audience has left the theater. You know, the event's over, right? We're done. But guess what? Now look at those brown patches.
Look at that.
All of those places are where the fire has burned away the vegetation. So you can see where the fires were. You can add up these perimeters, get acreage burned and such. And so that's good to know. Now remember, flood follows fire, and these are also natural fire breaks. So you need to know where these guys are. In the course of the 2015 summer season, we went from before with not much burn scar in this area to just a couple months later, we can see so much burn scarring on the landscape. What's interesting too about the satellite and looking at burn scars is you realize that burn scars are the gift that keeps on giving. You can forget that a couple of years ago maybe there was a fire in a certain area, but the satellite won't forget. So in the summertime we get wildfires in Alaska, but guess what? In the visible imagery here we can see the burn scars just a little bit, but they're not as prominent as in that veggie band. but then you can't see them at all if you cover them up with snow, right?
Exactly.
So here's an image from the middle of the winter time,
wow.
and snow on the ground by this recipe looks blue. Again, these are wavelengths of light that the human eye can't really see. We're getting up into the infrared, near infrared, and the way we've assigned colors is if there's snow on the ground or there's a glacier, it looks blue, kind of intuitive. So this is early April of the following year, 2016.
Okay.
We're just about to get into breakup. We got a lot of snow on the ground, and now it's all going to melt. And as the snow melts, then you get our final image here. Doesn't this look familiar? This looks like a lot of what we saw in September of the previous summer. So this is the spring of the next year. The fires themselves might not have overwintered, they're gone, but the fire scar does. And as the snow melts away, and then you have breakup, and then you have green up, whenever the leaves come out, the grass comes back, except in the burned areas, they're having a tough time because everything got burned off the previous year. So you can see these scars even the next summer, multiple years. It depends on what kind of vegetation there is. You know, some of the tussocky tundra grasses, they'll grow back really quick, but to get a forest to come back, that'll take much longer. So these burn scars, eventually the landscape will fill in the burn scar. It will heal itself, if you want to use that metaphor. But for the next few years, you can still keep track of these on satellite. And again, the reason we want to do that is that the burn scar can facilitate a flood, and it can act like a fire break. So there you are, the
Fascinating tools. So if you're a weather satellite and you're looking at my bowl of vegetables here, you might be able to pick out which one's the pea, which one's the tomato, and which one's the carrot, and apply that information precisely to whatever it is you're working on there. That is really fascinating stuff, that we have that capability from so high above the planet Earth, and Alaska for that matter.
Yep, eat your veggies.
Yes, definitely. I think I will. I'm hungry. Thanks so much for joining us again, Eric, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We'll see you right here next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and in our marine weather, we're looking at the sea ice edge, which has retreated way up now into the Arctic Ocean off the Arctic coast, as well as the northwest coast. We have plenty of open water, and we're almost there now to the minimum northward retreat of the ice. That's still about a week or two away, we'll see here, but definitely as we head toward the end of September. Otherwise, no major changes. Things are just progressing along now into more of a fall-like pattern as we continue to lose daylight at the rate of several minutes now a day. Looking at Sunday's marine weather forecast, we're going to see across the panhandle, southeast winds out of the south-southeast, 10 knots, inner waterways, waves a couple of feet, maybe upwards to 5 feet, Dixon entrance. Otherwise, south-southeast winds 10 to 15 knots, waves generally 6 to 8 feet. But the further west you get, you see the impacts of that low pressure and occluded front working its way first across the western and north central areas of the Gulf. On Monday, winds will be picking up from the southeast at 25 knots through the lower waterways with waves of 5 feet, and generally an onshore west or southwest flow of 20 to 25 knots and waves running 7 to 9 feet for Monday. South central areas, there could be gale force winds across much of the region on Sunday, 35, 45 knots. Their highest just off the Kenai, south of Homer and the mouth of Cook Inlet, even storm force winds that could impact areas of the Barren Islands, west of the Barren Islands, and including Kamishak Bay. And then as we go into the day on Monday, look for winds to turn more southerly after the passage of that occluded front. And winds will be around 20 knots there, Prince William Sound off the Kenai, as high as 30 knots along the length of Cook Inlet, with waves anywhere from around 10 feet in Cook Inlet upwards to 10 to 15 feet there off the Kenai. Winds will be brisk 45-knot gales there along the length of the Alaska Peninsula on Sunday, with waves as high as 15 to 20 feet on the North Pacific Gulf side, as well as down there north of Cold Bay. A little less so up toward Bristol Bay, just because the center of low pressure will be moving onshore in that area during the later afternoon and early evening. Following the low passage up into southwest interior, we are going to see winds across much of the region southwest to west to 30 knots, and waves generally still holding up there around 15 to 19 feet off of the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula and 10 to 15 feet on the Bering side. The Aleutian chain still seeing some 40-knot gales out toward Unalaska Dutch Harbor, falling off to westerly winds, west-northwest winds to 30 knots. Waves as high as 15 to 19 feet. Eastern Aleutians generally around 9 to 12 feet, the rest of the Aleutian chain. And then on Monday, look for winds to be westerly over the eastern Aleutians, 25 to 30 knots, turning more toward the southwest and then south at about 30 knots. And waves across much of the region 10 to as high as 15 feet through the eastern Aleutians as we go through Monday afternoon, and then about 7 to 13 feet for the North Pacific side. Across the west coast, the low will be moving into the interior north of Togiak and up there east of Bethel. So we'll see easterly flow off of the west coast, 20 to 25 knots, waves 4 to 7 feet. But St. Paul and St. George will be on the tail end of northwesterly gales to 35 knots, waves 10 to 13 feet. And then on Monday, across much of the region, look for winds to turn more north to northwest. At least westerly winds there around St. Paul and St. George, waves 12 feet, and then northerly 15 to 25 knots from around Norton Sound south of St. Lawrence, and waves 4 to 7 feet. Across the Arctic coast, winds a little lighter and more variable to start out on Sunday, 5 to 15 knots, waves only a couple feet. Easterly flow, though, there along the northwest coast, as well as Kotzebue Sound and off the Seward Peninsula, and strongest winds 20 to 25 knots there around the Bering Strait, lower Chukchi Sea, waves 4 to 7 feet. And then on Monday, winds will turn more northerly through the lower Chukchi Sea, Bering Strait at 25 to 30 knots, waves around 7 feet. The Arctic coast winds east-northeast, generally around 20 knots, and waves 3 to 5 feet. Quick check on Sunday, look for that low to be making landfall along the southwest coast, could bottom out close to 980 millibars, so that will be a windy system with areas of precipitation. I'll be back tomorrow night with more of the Alaska Weather Show. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.